Welcome back to Movies TV Mad. You can follow me on Twitter at Movies TV Mad, and a very warm welcome to Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily. And it's all going on today because James Gunn has reacted strongly to all the takes from the Snyderverse community, leading to Ray Fisher getting into the action, speaking against James Gunn. Well, we will read out James Gunn's Twitter thread. We will read out what Ray Fisher has had to say. We will read an article from comicbook.com that claims there are forces at WB that have no faith to little faith in what James Gunn is planning. So let's read what James Gunn had to say. Again, ill-conceived. I warned weeks ago that his constant teasing and tweeting out of context would come back to bite him on the arse. Call me Nostradamus yet again. It was always going to lead to this. But the war against James Gunn and the Snyderverse community really kicked off last week when he announced he would be replacing Henry Cavill as Superman. And now things have become very dark, very deep, and they're only going to get worse for James Gunn. Because basically, if it were me, I would never have done this Twitter thread. You're literally showing that you're triggered and saying you're not, basically him saying you're not going to intimidate us into changing our plans. Well, that's all well and good, mate. But your plans have to be successful. And if they're not, you're going to be in trouble because the Snyderverse stands are going to be on you every step of the way. The cardinal sin was removing Henry Cavill and treating Henry Cavill the way he's been treated. They told him he was back as Superman to tell the world. Then they told him to tell the world he's not back as Superman. And not once has David Zaslav publicly apologized to Henry Cavill for mucking him about. Leslie Grace has never got a public apology. The directors, the lads who did Batgirl, have never had a public apology. This goes way beyond James Gunn, but he has made multiple tactical errors. Basically, if it was me, when it was announced that Peter and James were running DC Studios, I would have made one statement for a press release. And then I would have said, we're keeping quiet until the final DCEU movie is released, to show some respect for the fans and the people who made those movies. And then once we've got a slate, we will start talking. This was his huge mistake because basically his mistakes come from vanity. So let's read his Twitter thread. One of the things Peter and I were aware of when we took the job as heads of DC Studios was a certain minority of people online that could be well uproarious, is that a word? And unkind to say the least. He's clearly talking about the Snyderverse stands. You know, listen, the Snyderverse stands out there, you know, talking about the historical tweets and calling him the P word. I don't want to say it on here because I think it's a despicable word and it makes me uncomfortable to even say it. Those people are in the wrong, and that's not how you win this war. I think the Snyderverse stands, as I said yesterday, have every right to fight back about the way Henry Cavill's been treated, how Zack Snyder's been treated. And also, you know, when we look at the leadership, you know, Peter Safran was part of the Walter Hamada era leadership of the DCEU. So really, how much has really changed here? Anyway, it continues. Our choices for the DCEU are based upon what we believe is best for the story and best for the DC characters who have been around for nearly 85 years. Perhaps these choices are great, perhaps not, but they are made with sincere hearts and integrity and always with the story in mind. Well, I hope there is integrity, James, and, you know, real integrity would have been, let's just reboot and start everything again. And let's tell the world, if we're going to have out of context teases on social media, at least say, right, I'm teasing you here, but let me be clear. We're starting from scratch. But I do want to talk to Zack Snyder and allow him to finish his arc in the DCEU. We will do our own thing. They do their own thing. He finishes his thing, and that would have been it. None of this had to happen. By allowing Zack to finish his stuff, Henry comes back, finishes his arc as Superman, and goes, skedaddles off. None of this has to happen. And yeah, some people will say you shouldn't give in to the mob mentality, the herd mentality. But you know, Zack Snyder and his corner of the universe have been treated very toxically as well. There's ways you deal with this, and this isn't the way to deal with this situation. No one loves to be harassed or called names, but to be frank, we've been through significantly worse. Disrespectful outcry will never ever affect our actions. So basically what he's done here is he's come out to say, I'm not intimidated by you. You're not scaring me. We're going to do what we're going to do, whatever you say. Basically, he's standing by what he wants to do. Of course he's going to do that. But basically, James, they're coming after you because they want to get a reaction from the studio. It's not really about you. They know that you're cancelling basically the Snyderverse. I don't know what else you're doing. And we'll get into that as well, because he replies to certain fans making other accusations about keeping some stuff and getting rid of others. But the point is, the Snyderverse stands don't want Henry Cavill out as Superman. They want to restore the Snyderverse. Now, the Snyderverse stands, since the Henry Cavill removal, the announcement, have basically come up with some interesting things. For example, since the Henry Cavill announcement, the Warner Brothers Discovery stocks and shares are plummeting. They've been plummeting for a while, but the Henry Cavill news hasn't helped their situation. So this is a very intelligent movement, and that part of the movement who are using intellectual tactics like that have got my respect. The stuff about calling James Gunn the P word and boring on about the historical tweets, I'm not interested in all of that. But I didn't know this, and we'll get into the Ray Fisher stuff, but I didn't know that he supported Joss Whedon when the accusations on the reshoot set first came out by Ray Fisher and other people. Then he apologized, but that tweet got deleted. We'll get into that as well. We were aware there would be a period of turbulence when we took this gig, and we knew we would sometimes have to make difficult and not so obvious choices, especially in the wake of the fractious nature of what came before us. So this is interesting. When he says fractious nature, I might tweet this to him later. When he says fractious nature of what come before, does he talk about Walter Hamada's era in the DCEU, who he used to call Walt, or is it just Zack Snyder that he's talking about? So, you know, at the end of the day, he keeps on talking. Basically, a lot of this is retreading the boards. He's saying the same stuff he said before, basically by injecting, I'm not scared of the Snyderverse stands. Basically, James, the problem with you is ego and vanity. All you had to do is one press release when you were announced as co-head of DC Studios with Peter. Then you could have kept quiet and got on with your job behind the scenes. But you have an ego. You have a huge ego. And that's the problem here. This is why I said from the beginning, maybe it would have been a better idea to stick with the original idea. Mike DeLuca as head of DC Studios. Because, again, let me make another point about this situation as I keep where I am right here. But let me make another point. When the MCU had first few movies, Kevin Feige had such hate from Marvel fans that you've never heard before. This hate that James Gunn is getting is absolutely nothing. I remember they wanted, there was absolutely a campaign to sack Kevin Feige as the creative in charge of pushing forward the Marvel Cinematic Universe. He basically only responded to this hate in an official capacity and did it in clever ways, in professional ways. You know, Kevin Feige, you know, Mike DeLuca, people like this don't act like this. This is not how you deal with this situation. How you deal with this situation is you introduce yourself as the new co-lead of DC Studios and you get on with your job and you never speak again until the other 4 movies are done. That's what clever people do. Yesterday I said that James Gunn is a clever bloke. Now I'm starting to wonder if I'm not mistaken about his intellect. Ultimately, James Gunn will be judged on the decisions he makes and whether they're successful or they fail or not. But the Snyderverse stands are going nowhere. And it's the Henry Cavill situation that kicked this plethora this crazy situation really on. Because the Snyderverse stands always look vocal, but to be fair to them, they were pretty quiet. They were making a few comments, this and that, but this Henry Cavill situation, this ridiculous situation, and let me ask you this question. I know what I've said before, I think everything should be rebooted and we should start again. But was it really necessary to fire Henry Cavill as Superman? Could he have got one more movie, right? I don't know. Because if it turns out that Henry and a couple of others are the only ones getting fired, he's already denied in this, replying to someone in this thread that he's never said he's going to remove Gal Gadot. Just because you ain't said it doesn't mean you ain't going to do it. We don't know. We'll see what happens. It's going to be an interesting situation. So, finally he says, but this means little to us in comparison to our jobs as artists and custodians in helping to create a wide and wonderful future for DC. And I, for one, James, hope you succeed. But that doesn't mean I'm against the Snyderverse fans saying their piece and fighting to at least get Zack to finish his arc in a little corner of DC Studios. This is the point. And your refusal to do this is really getting you into trouble. But it's not even about giving Zack an opportunity to finish his arc. It's the terrible, disgusting, toxic treatment of Henry Cavill that's coming back to haunt him. He was clearly forced into making an early announcement about Cavill being replaced as Superman because the press were going to come out with it. They were going to have evidence. The press knew this was happening in the first place. So he's not tapping the links like we first thought. He's just a man with an ego who can't keep his mouth shut. James Gunn talks too much, and there lies the problem. But then he gets a few replies here. Who knows if it's true, but recasting all the main DCEU characters but keeping some will be interesting how Peacemaker and Suicide Squad characters' actors live on. But the others don't, particularly when they have all interacted together. This is what James Gunn had to say in response to this. I keep seeing posts with this untrue theory, we're not recasting everyone except the Suicide Squad. So yeah, that's what he's saying. He says, I keep seeing posts with this untrue theory. We're not recasting everyone except the Suicide Squad. So this could mean one of two things. It could mean that they're not recasting everyone, but that actually they're rebooting the whole thing, including his Suicide Squad characters. So that will be very, very interesting as well. So we search on to see if he said anything else here. Michael Rosenbaum, ooh, that's all he had to say, funny. So yeah, so here we go, yeah, here's another one. I'll be happy as long as you cancel all the DC movies and replace them with sliver sequels. Maybe keep a few of those Weasel movies you must be planning. So yeah, there's a bit of a piss take here. So yeah, look, it's a very, very interesting situation, but he's denying that he's actually going to replace everyone apart from his Suicide Squad universe. So that's very, very interesting as well. So we now know either he's not going to replace everyone, or he's going to replace everyone, including, excuse me, his Suicide Squad actors. So it means that he could be rebooting the whole thing, or he might not be. Again, we're still in this situation out of context, this secret squirrel stuff. James, if you wanted to keep this plan a secret, you should have had one press release and then kept your mouth shut. Now let's hear from Ray Fisher and see what he had to say. So this is what Ray Fisher had to say. The way James Gunn uses fake grace on Twitter is really funny. Him going to bat for Joss Whedon, pseudo-apologising for it, then deleting it immediately before taking his new DC job is not. Refusing to apologise for toxic behaviour seems to be a job requirement for WBDC. So this is very, very interesting, and he posts some screenshots. And he basically what he shows is Alan Tudyk denying about the Joss Whedon accusations as well. So it wasn't there, but I have known Joss for 17 years. I honestly can't even imagine it. and I have a pretty good imagination. Wow. So yeah, the denials were there. So then he's got a screenshot of a historical tweet from James Gunn. You got it shortly after Alan tweeted this. He apologised for commenting on a situation he knew nothing about. I read what Alan said and I thought, damn, he's right. It was something I knew nothing about and I shouldn't have liked the tweet. So yeah, James Gunn actually apologised for that situation to Ray Fisher. So this is not really that historical. This is him responding to Ray Fisher. Actually, I think this may be him responding to Ray Fisher at the time because the profile picture on Twitter is different. And so he basically steps back. Basically, James Gunn liked the denial from Alan Tudyk that I just read out. And this is what Ray Fisher is talking about. So it's really, really interesting. It's a very, very, very interesting situation. A lot of high-profile people stuck up for Joss Whedon at the time. But all this stuff, like from Ray Fisher, is what happens when you don't deal with things in the right way. And I'm going to be boring and repeat what I've already said. If you announce your position, if you make a publicity, an official statement through the studio when you get this gig, then you get on with your work, you get on with your homework and keep your gob shut and talk when you've got a slate to announce. None of this shit happens, but he keeps on talking too much. And who knows who he told about his plans, for Henry Cavill to replace him and stuff. Maybe he told one of his mates, maybe he told some trusted journalists, who knows? So obviously, James Gunn isn't the sharpest tool in the box. But as I say, all this stuff could have been absolutely avoided. But the main thing is, James Gunn's post, thread on Twitter, responding to you Snyderverse fans who are mostly very intelligent people and have got very intelligent tactics in the fight to restore the Snyderverse and bring Henry Cavill back as Superman, because this has connected itself onto the fight now, bringing Henry Cavill back. These are very, very serious people. But basically, James Gunn, doing the Twitter thread in the first place, says, I'm triggered. I can't handle this situation. This situation is too much for me. There was no need to respond to any of it. You've made your position clear. You and Peter are going to do what you're going to do, and no one is going to stop you from doing it. Well, apart from the people at WB Pictures and the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery, because who knows what will happen by the new year. Can James Gunn survive this? Can James Gunn hold his nerves, kind of impact his changes to DC live action and see if it's successful? In a few years' time, we could be looking back at this and saying, wow, James Gunn has been such a success at DC, and just remembering all the pressure he was under at the time, credit to him for holding his nerve. That might be the history we're looking at, but more than likely, it's somebody else who's going to be run out of town in the end. Because, this Snyder situation has been an ongoing situation for so long, and these people are just not handling it properly. But it's not just the fans that are a problem to James Gunn. No, he has a lot of resistance behind the scenes at WB as well. Let's get into it. Warner Brothers insider reportedly doubts James Gunn can manage DC Studios. I wonder who this is. His name couldn't be Mike DeLuca, the guy who was originally going to take the DC Studios head chair job, right? The co-chair of Warner Brothers Pictures, Mike DeLuca. As I said earlier, or if it was in a version of this video already deleted because I keep on doing fuck-ups while I'm trying to record this video, but I have said that. I think Mike DeLuca would have been the better head of DC Studios. Mike has been around. Let's be clear here. James Gunn is a capable writer and director, but he's no CEO. And, he's not really... look, there's one thing to write a really good movie and to direct a really good movie. It's another thing to make huge studio decisions. And he's basically the co-lead of DC Studios. He can replace people. He can bring people in. He's making he's making structure decisions. He's changing the foundations of the new franchise compared to the older franchise. These are huge decisions. These are decisions that could work, but they're decisions that might not work as well. So, DC Studios co-head James Gunn faces questions within Warner Brothers about his management ability after a slew of changes he's made since taking over. As you can see, Peter Safran is working quietly in the background. He's fine. He's under no pressure whatsoever. It's James Gunn who's putting himself out there, going out in the field and taking all these shell cases. You've got to give him credit, at least for that. I mean, he's brave enough to keep on coming out, which I respect him for, but will it be all for nothing? This could be career suicide for James Gunn, or this could be the biggest achievement in his career. We'll have to wait and see what happens there if he survives that far. So this article is by Jody Brown, I think that's what it says. Anyway, facing countless questions from fans and industry insiders since taking over DC Studios, James Gunn now has doubters within Warner Brothers about his management capabilities following a raft of reported changes made under his watch. Let's be clear, none of these doubts were officially put out there until Henry Cavill was removed, because there's people at the studio, aka Mike DeLuca, Pam Adby, the co-chairs of WB Pictures, who wanted to keep Cavill and do a Man of Steel 2. We've already discussed that with one of the best creatives in the business, basically the creator of Peaky Blinders, who had a great idea. So there are people within the studio who still want to do this. So there's a lot of opposition with James Gunn, for James Gunn, basically out there within fandoms and within the studio. It's not just the Snyderverse people who are against him. He has an uphill struggle to achieve what he wants. Even before there's been anything shot of the new Superman film, he could be out the door. That is the reality of the situation. A report in the New York Post cites one Warner Brothers insider as suggesting Gunn doesn't have what it takes to lead DC's rebuild. According to the source, Gunn lacks experience and doesn't compare to Marvel Studios head Kevin Feige because of it. Gunn has never run anything, the insider said. I wonder if big filmmakers will work for another director with zero experience guiding movies through a huge grinder of a system. He's not Kevin Feige of Marvel. Right, let's be clear about this. I don't give a shit that he doesn't have the experience in being a CEO. I don't care that he's not Kevin Feige. And look, it's true. He isn't going to have the pull of a Kevin Feige and other people, but people do like him. The problem is, and this is the problem, you've got a general here in James Gunn who has a flawed history. Basically, yes, I'm talking about the historical tweets. They are a problem. So there's people who know about him now within the industry. Now, we know the industry is famous for abuse. We know that. There's no hiding that. There is a history of child abuse and child abuse allegations in Hollywood as a whole. So maybe they'll work with him anyway. But those tweets being revealed, right, by his enemies all those years ago has hurt him. I mean, he's probably got even more skeletons in his closet, and if he has, the Snyderverse stands and his enemies are going to find them. And that's the problem. I don't give a shit about his lack of, his inexperience, because, you know, he's probably, 50 or so? He's around my age. He's got to be. Slightly younger, slightly older, whatever. He's been in the industry a long time. He understands. He reads comic books, he's a geek, he's a nerd, he could do something special. So, yes, he's not Kevin Feige, neither does he have to be, and that's not my issue here. I don't really care about the historical tweets personally, it doesn't affect me. But, in terms of his reputation, it doesn't help when you've got a general going into battle for you who actually has a very flawed history. Furthermore, the source pointed out that many at DC Studios felt pessimistic about its leadership role. The source even said DC begged Joker director Todd Phillips to take the position before eventually opting for Gunn and Peter Safran. Gunn and Safran assumed co-leadership of DC Studios this past October. Now, we know that David Zaslav wanted Todd Phillips to be a consultant, and he really respects him. I'll tell you the truth about this respect, it's bullshit. Why does he keep on asking directors to run a studio? I don't understand. Todd Phillips has no idea about DC. He's made a great DC movie in Joker. I love it. He's great. He's a genius. But why would you want Todd Phillips to run DC Studios? So the problem of all of this is this man, David Zaslav. All he sees is box office. Oh, Todd Phillips made $1 billion DC movies. Oh, I know, I'll become obsessed with him and get him to run DC Studios. He probably wanted Phillips and Matt Reeves to run it together. But that's not a good idea. Having a director as a CEO or co-CEO of DC Studios isn't going to get you the win you want. Because Kevin Feige is a producer. He has experience in producing Marvel content before he came onto the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now, I think the balance between James Gunn and Peter Safran is actually good. Peter is a producer and has experience producing. That's good, he can do that. And James Gunn is a creative. So James has the element of being the creative, and Peter has the element of being a producer. That's a lot better than getting Todd Phillips, just the director, to run it. That would have ended in tears because you wouldn't get the interconnected universe you wanted, because Todd Phillips doesn't know nearly enough about DC to do it. So that, as much as I love Todd, that would have been a dumb decision, and it shows you how dumb Zaslav actually is. Anyway, since taking over, Gunn has come under a lot of fire for some major decisions under his watch as he and Safran attempt to rebuild the DC universe. The most talked about of these decisions was cancelling Henry Cavill's Superman return. Despite Cavill previously announcing his return and making a cameo in Black Adam, Gunn announced a new Superman film based on an earlier part of the superhero's life, while confirming that someone other than Cavill will play the titular role. After Cavill subsequently confirmed he wouldn't return as Clark Kent's famous alter ego, Gunn faced angry DC fans who felt he coldly handled the situation, an accusation the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise helmet denied. He also refuted claims there's bad blood between himself and the Enola Holmes 2 star, even suggesting he and Cavill could work on non-DC related projects down the line following talks. Well, were they non-DC or were they other characters in the DC universe? Who knows? And we don't know how that ended. We don't know if we're going to be mates now and, we like him, blah, blah, blah. If any of that is true, or it's just literally trying to calm everyone down. It hasn't worked. This is the reason. We're at war now. Well, I'm not at war. I'm just a DC fan. I just love my movies and TV shows, right? I want to see DC at its best. DC has been a clusterfuck from its beginning, even though I love the Snyderverse. I do want James and Peter to do their thing. I do want them to start again. But I do think there's nothing wrong with having Zack to finish his arc off in a little corner. This is what they could have done. This is what they could have announced. We're doing our thing, he's finishing his thing. It's fine. You could even allow Zack to finish off his stuff, and then that gives James and Peter longer to do their thing, to relaunch the whole universe. It would have been great. This was what Zack was planning from the very beginning. Because there is money in the Snyderverse, and nobody can say there's not. Maybe there's not the big money, but there is money in the Snyderverse. Again, this situation has been handled all wrongly. Not only is Cavill not coming back as Superman, but it appears most of the DCU's familiar faces could also be leaving the universe. Wonder Woman 3 starring Gal Gadot will reportedly not be moving ahead, while a cameo featuring Gadot in The Flash has been scrapped. Furthermore, Jason Momoa may no longer star as Aquaman, as he's being tipped within DC to play another of its characters in Lobo for an upcoming film franchise based on the intergalactic bounty hunter. I think he'll definitely cameo in that Superman movie first. Again, James Gunn leaking that basically Momoa could be playing Lobo and may not be playing Aquaman anymore was so disrespectful to James Wan. James Wan is trying to make a movie. He wants his movie to be successful, and you're leaking this shit. This is really disrespectful for your other directors, James. What have you got to say about that? You keep on talking about a toxic fandom. You keep on talking about yours and Peter's plans, but you just haven't handled this situation very well. Nobody has handled these situations well since 2013. It's ridiculous, right? And I'll get into my opinion how all this can end and we can have peace. In addition to his DC duties, Gunn is currently promoting the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special, blah, blah, blah. Well, we don't really care about that, do we? All we care about is DC. So how do we solve this situation? Because the Cavill, basically getting rid of Cavill has ignited an explosive situation. And let me be clear, absolutely clear, it's the minority who are calling James Gunn names and harassing James Gunn. It's the majority of Snyderverse fans who are talking about the Warner Brothers Discovery shares falling, talking about a possibility of them being minority shareholders in Warner Brothers Discovery. Very clever, intelligent tactics. As long as you're intelligent and you're constructive and you are not harassing the man and you are not being vindictive about the historical tweets, then I back you in your fight. Because I believe there's a place for James and Peter's brand new DC universe, and there's a place for Zack Snyder to finish his Snyderverse arc, and that's how I feel. And that's the only way we're going to have peace. Yet again, another DC WB leadership at loggerheads. We have got Adby and DeLuca versus James Gunn and Peter Safran. These are facts, everyone. Another messy situation. We've replaced one messy situation with another messy situation. And the only way we will ever have peace within this situation is if this studio allows Zack Snyder to finish off his arc. And people may say, we don't want to bow down to the mob rule. Well, you're going to have to, because the mob rule will continue, because the Snyderverse fandom are gangsters and they will keep on digging. They will keep on coming after James Gunn and Peter Safran and David Zaslav until they get what they want. They want Zack Snyder, who was treated hideously, right, by this studio, and ousted and never got the chance to finish his thing, using his daughter's death as the reason why he moved on, when that was a lie. And let's be absolutely clear here, Peter Safran, the co-chair of the newly formed DC Studios, was part of the previous leadership led by Walter Hamada. So what has changed here really? I told you a few weeks ago, the out of context teases and tweets and social media posts by James Gunn would come back to haunt him. I told you that all of this wasn't the smartest way to do things. And the whole situation with bringing Cavill back and then getting rid of Cavill is very, very clumsy. And there you have it, everyone. This is where we are right now. And James Gunn basically confirmed within that Twitter thread that he's actually very, very bothered by the Snyderverse fans and what they're doing and saying about him. In a lot of ways, he's saying, come on then, keep on coming, which isn't a good idea, James. You don't know when to keep your mouth shut, James, and that's the problem. It's all about ego and vanity with you, James, and that's the problem. How long can he survive this? And Ray Fisher coming into the mix as well is very, very problematic. This has been Tuesday's edition of the DC Universe Daily with me, Mick, your host with the most. Just ask your girlfriends and your wives. Please like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you never miss this beautiful perfection. And I'll see you again in the next video. Until I see you again, goodbye, au revoir, auf Wiedersehen.